Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The resumption of debate on the government loan MOF bill. Professor Hoon, Hian, Teck.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, although the Singapore government has borrowed from international lenders previously to fund public infrastructure projects, such as the loans it took in the 1980s to build the first MRT lines, this bill is significant in the scale of borrowing and the types of infrastructure that qualify. It has been remarked that it is efficient to issue new bonds under the proposed Significant Infrastructure Government Loan Act, SINGA, as it allows the country to benefit from the current low interest rate environment. To place this remark in perspective, it is helpful to recognize that for a small open economy like Singapore that is well integrated with the international capital market, the interest rate charged on a sovereign loan is, roughly speaking, the sum of a safe rate of interest, such as the interest on the US Treasury bill, and a credit risk. While the Singapore economy largely takes the safe rate of interest as given, the currently low credit risk is the result of past fiscal prudence. Our capacity in future to generate tax revenue to meet our future spending needs will be necessary to enable the country to maintain this low credit risk. In other words, the credit risk can move up or down even when the safe interest rate stays constant. What factors led to the creation of fiscal space in the past? And what factors might affect Singapore's credit rating in future? Before answering these two questions, it is good to quickly review the justification for the SINGA Act that we're talking about in the Parliament. The purpose of the Act is to enable the government to borrow to finance nationally significant infrastructure to support or improve national productivity or Singapore's economic, environmental, or social sustainability. As I read it, there are two dimensions to the infrastructure investment. The first is public investment, such as in roads and major highways, which serves to raise the productivity of firms. There is evidence that the stock of public capital in highways, roads, and so on, complements private capital so that the public capital raises the returns to private business investments. Consequently, workers' productivity is also raised. The second is infrastructure investment, which serves to mitigate the adverse effects of climate change, such as seawalls and dikes. In the absence of such investment, the second type of investment, not only would national productivity fall, but lives could be at risk with coastal hazards. Since the benefits derived can be enjoyed by as yet unborn generations, the government of the day must act on their behalf. They are not around to vote. It is also justifiable to issue new bonds to finance such infrastructure investments so that future generations can share in bearing the tax burden. This is intergenerational distributive justice. Now, to the question of what factors led to the currently low credit risk. No doubt, Singapore's remarkable economic catch-up since independence effectively expanded the tax base at given tax rates. With economic growth, real income steadily increased decade after decade. Income inequality was not a serious problem in the first couple of decades after independence, as industrialization increased the demand for relatively unskilled to semi-skilled workers, thus pulling up their wage earnings. With a relatively young population then, healthcare spending was a smaller share of the budget. Thus, the demand for fiscal resources to support social spending was less pressing. Budgetary surpluses added to our national reserves. Unlike unfunded social security systems, a pay-as-you-go system, where current taxes on the working young are used to pay for the benefits of retirees, Singapore's fully funded social security system, the Central Provident Fund, also added to national saving. These factors altogether contributed to Singapore's good credit rating. That's how we achieve our low credit risk. Looking to the future, what factors might affect Singapore's credit rating? With health expenditure rising as a share of gross domestic product in tandem with an aging population, having the capacity to raise tax revenue to fund such spending will become important. The concept of fiscal sustainability is useful as a way to think about how to maintain a low credit risk. The government budget at any point in time is fiscally sustainable if the expected present value of primary surpluses, which do not include interest payments, is at least as large as the size of the public debt. Although a country can still run budget deficits when it is hit by a recession, for example, it must ultimately plan to generate tax revenue that is in excess of current spending in other years, if it is to be able to service an outstanding stock of public debt. To use an analogy, suppose that at the start of your career, you take out a loan. Then, although in future periods you might still occasionally borrow, there must be sufficiently many periods during which you spend less than your income for you to be creditworthy. In anticipation of increased social spending, in particular on health with an aging population, it would be necessary to raise taxes in order to remain fiscally sustainable. The government has announced in Budget 2021 that it plans to raise the GST rate from 7% to 9% anytime from 2020 to 2025. From the perspective of the analysis just provided, one benefit to the country of raising tax revenue in anticipation of higher social spending is that the credit risk or risk premium can be kept low. In other words, whatever the safe interest rate is, the borrowing costs incurred to service the loan undertaken in this act can be kept relatively low by maintaining good credit worthiness. Returning to the analogy, suppose that in the course of your working life, the interest rate unexpectedly rises. Then, in order for you not to default, you would have to tighten your belt and cut down spending unless you discover that your income is also going to increase. While the safe interest rate is currently low and expected to be low for some time, unexpected events that raise the safe interest rate can affect fiscal sustainability. Data show that in the early 1980s, the first half of the decade of the 80s, the safe interest rate experienced a sharp spike that caused fiscal crisis in many emerging economies and posed budgetary challenges for some advanced economies as well, since the cost of servicing public debt sharply increased. In order to re-establish fiscal sustainability in the event that the safe interest rate rises, it is necessary to either raise taxes or to cut spending. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, there is indeed justification for the government to issue new bonds to finance significant infrastructure projects that would raise national productivity or mitigate the adverse effects of climate change. We must maintain the reputation that we have built up over the years for good financial management of our fiscal affairs. In this context, I support the bill.